Cyclist is an incredibly powerful tool that allows you to associate the action of one item with the animation cycle of another. Well, what does that mean? Well, let's take a look at this setup here. And this ship is from Ron Thornton's new movie Firewall, and it's going to be a fun movie. And they're taking advantage of Cyclist in the rig for the ship to allow the animators to work much faster when it comes time to animate the ships. So let's take a look at some uses of Cyclist for this. I'm going to sneak down here to the intake flaps, and instead of animating each one of these flaps open, what I can do is click this null object, Y for rotate, and when I rotate this null, each one of those flaps animates open. And that way I don't have to do each one individually. We'll take a look at a couple other places that it's being used, and then we'll take a look at how to set it up. So one of the other things that we have is cockpit. So for this null, when I rotate this null, the cockpit slides forward. You can see right there. So that's sliding forward. And then once that has slid forward, I can come over here to the transition doors, and if I rotate that, they're rotating closed. Now I'm going to zoom in because I really want you to see that they're not just sliding across. There's multiple motions going on here. So let's see if we can get a good angle here. Now watch the curve that happens when they slide out and then they rock down and then rock into place. So it's not a linear motion. Okay, so we've got multiple keyframes going on there to create that motion. Okay, so let's take a look at we've got one labeled air brakes, so let's try that out. I'm just gonna position this and then go over to air brakes, and when I open this up, it's working with multiple flaps. We've got the one on the wing here, we've got one up here on the cockpit, one back here, and as I rotate that, all of those animate. Okay, now my favorite one, there's a wings one. I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll go to my favorite one. The wings use of Cyclist allows us to rotate those back. Okay, but let's go to the really cool one, which is the props back here. Okay, we've got the propellers, but we're going to animate them in a new position so that the ship can go faster. So we've got the propellers here, and as I rotate this, okay, I'm rotating one item here, this null. It rotates the blades, they fold in, and then they get pushed in a little bit. Okay, so by moving one null, I'm just rotating one null, I'm getting this animation cycle. And this is a great example of using Cyclist. So now that we've seen some examples, let's see how easy it is to set up, because if it wasn't easy to set up, maybe it wouldn't be as useful. But because it's easy to set up and it's this powerful, it's a must-use in production. So let's build a simple little object setup that we can use to apply Cyclist. I'm just going to create some kind of little robotic arm just out of boxes, just so we can keep it simple on the modeling side, and we'll take a look at setting up Cyclist. So I've got one object here, okay, and I'm just going to make a couple more. Let's draw a thinner one here, and let's draw one more, and we're going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, something like that. So it's going to be a little robotic arm, and we need to break this up. We're going to break it up into multiple layers so that when we load the multiple layers into layout, it'll be like multiple objects. So I'm just going to select, cut, go to layer 2, paste, select here, select connect, cut, go into layer 3, paste. Let's set up the pivot points for our layers, view, pivot, and I'm just going to move this up to here, move over to layer 2, and move the pivot down to here, and in layer 1 the pivot's in a good place. Okay, so got my three objects, each in a different layer, and I've got my pivot point set. Let's just go ahead and save it. File, save object, and we'll just call this boxes 001. I like to put version numbers on there. So save, and let's shoot that over to layout, send object to layout. Okay, now that we have our objects, let's go to perspective view. Now that we have our objects and we've got our pivot points, let's go ahead and set up parenting. So I want this item parented to this and this to that, just so that we have a nice hierarchy to work with. So M for motion options, and for this item, I'm going to parent it to layer 2. Okay, and for layer 2, I'm going to parent it to layer 1. We'll close that down. That allows me to rotate layer 1 and all the items go with it, rotate layer 2 and layer 3 goes with it, and then when I rotate layer 3 it just moves on its own. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create an animation that we can have another object drive it. I'm going to take this light, push it out of the way. Take the camera, push it out of the way. We just don't need it. So on frame, let's say that on frame 10, this object rotates down. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and keyframe for all items. Hit OK. Move over to frame 20, and we're going to have this item rotate this way. And we'll keyframe all items, enter, enter. And then on, say, frame 25, we'll have this rotate in, and we'll keyframe all frames. And then at frame 30, we'll have the whole unit rotate like this. Actually, I'm going to put that on 35 just to give us a little more room. So in the dope track, I'm just going to slide it over to 35. Okay, so here's our little animation. Okay, we've got multiple keyframes going on and multiple animation. And what I'm going to do is create a null object that's going to drive all of this so that later on we can just move one object and it'll drive this entire animation. So null, we'll call this master control. Let's make it a ring shape, and we'll keep it in the y-axis, and scale 1 meter should work. There it is. T for move. I'll just move it right above this. So let's zoom in and we'll get a good look at our setup here. Now, I want, whenever I rotate this object, I want it to drive this animation. So I'm just going to select this bottom object, M for motion, the motion options, come over to the IK and Modifiers tab, and I'm going to add a modifier. So I'm going to add Cyclist. Okay, double click to get the options, and I want the cycle control to be the master control, and let's make it on the heading. And for the control range, let's do to 90 degrees, and then we're going to have the end behavior stop. We don't want our animation to repeat once it hits the end of the animation, and we'll hit OK. And let's test it out. Whenever I rotate this, it plays through. See how it's playing through the animation of the lower. I'm going to undo. It plays through the animation of this. I want it to play through all of them, so I'm just going to right-click and copy. Move to this object, edit, paste. Edit, paste. It saves me from having to set it up again. So now I have the whole setup. Now, just so that I get a better display on this ring, I'm going to go ahead and set up some limits on the heading. And let's just do from 0 to 90. Okay, go ahead and close that down. And now we can see kind of a ghosted view here. And this is the angle that we're going to work within. So if I am in frame 0, I'm going to go all the way to frame 60. We didn't use 60 frames in our animation, but I'm going to use 60 frames in this animation. So I'm just going to rotate this all the way. And now the motion takes place. Instead of, I believe it was over 35 frames, now it's over 60 frames. But I can say, let's say on frame 30, I'm going to rotate back a little bit, and now I'm playing through my animation here. Okay, one last thing before we wrap up. I'm going to hop over to the graph editor, and one thing that you can do if you want is to head over to the Modifiers Add Modifier, and Cycler. What Cycler is a channel-oriented version of Cyclist. So if you wanted to take advantage of, you could just go ahead and use the individual channels, but if you had a morph target or light intensity or something like that, and you wanted to drive that with Cyclist, you can using Cycler right here in the graph editor. So once again, just a quick introduction to Cyclist and also Cycler. It's great for things like landing gears on planes, and as you saw with the firewall plane, you can set up all sorts of things and drive the animation with one object.